We are back with another month installment of Serious Security, where we take all your security seriously. Join again. Thanks,
I mean,
Lisa, for joining again. And thanks everyone for the kind support and comments and all of that. Um, Before we begin, anything exciting happening this month, Lisa, in your world?
I don't even think I really know what month it is. I booked this weekend away in Wales, and as I was booking it, I was sort of like, why is everything so expensive? And there's just no availability. This is really strange. And I booked it, and then my friend Reg was like, you do know that's the bank holiday, right? And I'm like, no, I hate bank holidays. So my one relaxing weekend away is to an area of the UK that's going to be completely busy and crazy. So it's going to be stressful.
Sounds like fun. But at least we get another 3-day weekend, which is um, wonderful.
I thought you
Uh,
got Friday as well. I don't know. I don't know what's
uh,
happening.
uh, uh, yeah, well, I only get 3 days. So anyway, and hey, Headshot, hey, Jared, thanks for joining.
Hey guys.
Yeah, well, I hope you have a lovely time away and don't have too many crowds. But
Yeah, that's true.
it's not the school holidays, at least, so there's that.
Gerard writes, it's hopefully not get stuck in a cave month. Thanks, Gerard. Anyone who makes any caving references will have a mandatory caving trip coming their way.
Hey, what actually happened with that thing with Dave?
Oh yes, we all need to. This is a campaign that I'm launching. It's not for charity or really anything other than just hilarity. So the bet is I will eat pineapple on pizza, an entire pineapple on pizza, whatever you call it, piece of trash. I will do that, and Dave Kennedy has to come down a cave with me and we'll do a live stream. Well, we won't live stream because there's no signal, but we'll do a whole video that will be put up of him going caving. Which he's terrified of. So please make sure if you see Dave at any point or you interact with him online, put some pressure on because he's gone very quiet.
Yes. So we want to see Dave in a cave. Also, we want to see Lisa eat pineapple pizza. It's a win-win. Come on, people. It's a win-win.
It's a win-win.
Great. So let's start this month's session. And the first topic that we have was around romance scams, and more specifically, like, why do we think
It's
sorry,
a
I'm just
very
trying
intricate question that he's
my memory is terrible.
reading is hard sometimes.
Trying to find it. So, topic 1, romance fraud. Why do we think it can't happen to us?
We're arrogant.
Well, my answer is simple. I would be 10 feet under in a grave. So there's that. Well,
Yeah, okay, true. However, I think the biggest thing is that you give up boundaries, because I think in all of the romance fraud cases that I've ever heard about, there's been some really successful people, like really high powered lawyers, very, very intelligent individuals who are by no means at the sort of level of kind of desperation or, very intelligent individuals. And I think what it comes down to is you see red flags and then you dismiss those red flags because they're always there. There's always something, right? So for example, they'll ask really early on. There's always like a big tragedy. There's always some big event where, they can't pay a bill or something happens and they need you to pay just a small amount of money. And a lot of the romance fraud cases, the victim will pay the money, let's say £100, €100. And then that sort of perpetrator will actually pay them back to establish this kind of relationship that, you know, if I borrow money from you, I do pay it back. And often that's what happens. And then obviously the amount increases and increases, and then eventually they disappear. But I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that when you meet someone online, you don't necessarily know them. And if they're sort of putting it forward like they know you really well, but you've never actually met up and you've never really had a decent conversation and you've never really experienced, you know, and got to know this person over a long period of time, I think the relationship ends up being very fast and you overlook a lot of red flags that in hindsight you probably would think, that's not normal.
Well, the other thing we've got to consider is these people who are doing these scams are often, let's face it, experts at it. So they know exactly what things to use to trigger, what emotions to trigger, and emotions override logic, right? So they know how to trigger those. So people who would normally be quite logical have that emotional override, and then logic doesn't come into it. So that's where they fall for these things. And the people perpetrating this are very, very, very good at what they do.
Yeah, and I think I've had situations that are not at all romance worthy, but just okay, I'm going to tell you a really funny. Well, it's funny, but it's not funny. It's kind of creepy. It's a bit gross, but everyone enjoys that on a Thursday night. So here we go. So I'm a climber. There's this gentleman in the climbing community who's significantly older than me. Oh, definitely old enough to be my father. And he's very established, very sort of well-known climber. And he sent me a message and he sort of said it would be great if we could go climbing one day. And I thought, oh, this is fabulous. Like, you're a really great climber. Yes, let's do that. And then the next message that came was, maybe afterwards we can go and see a show. And I was like, that's moved the goalposts a little bit beyond where I want it to be. And then it moved again to dinner. And I was like, again, you know, I don't really know you. And as soon as I started to say, look, I see this as us going climbing, I don't really know you, this isn't something that I'm particularly interested in, he got really nasty really quickly. It went from like quite sort of cordial and whatever to quite nasty. And I was thinking that if you're someone who isn't horrible like me, that actually you might be quite accommodating and say, okay, yeah, we'll do this, or oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll do that. And that's basically how I think a lot of this stuff starts. Now, I'm not saying he at all was a scammer. He's not. Yep. He's just creepy. But generally speaking, I think this is how a lot of this stuff starts. And when I look at sort of romance fraud, people think of it as people stealing money from the victim. But I've also seen cases where someone has fallen in love online and the person has got them to take in like USB sticks into the company. They've got them to click on emails. They've got them to download dodgy files onto basically production systems. And they've done this because they think this is their girlfriend or their boyfriend or whatever. So it doesn't necessarily always need to go after, you know.
I think you lost a bit of signal at the end. I don't know if it was me or you, but yeah, hopefully everyone got that. I got a good chunk of it. And yeah, I entirely agree. Yeah, for once it's not me, it's you, Lisa.
No, damn it.
Yes. But yeah, it is very important note that it's not always financial. It's the other things that they can do. Just look at some of the prison stuff as well, trying to get people to smuggle in contraband and all of those kinds of things. So it's sad because often those people who are targeted, not always, sometimes people are cheating on their spouses and that, so it's hard to feel sympathetic sometimes to those people. But those who are targeted sometimes are very lonely and desperate for a relationship. So not only do they suffer this loss and deceit, but they're still lonely. So It's sad to see, especially in those cases. So we have a question from Headshot. What percentage do you think sextortion cases do you think started as a romance scam? Would you say there are two sides of the same coin?
Interesting, isn't it? I wonder with romance scams if it goes off the rails, i.e., if the person starts calling you out or starts saying, no, I'm not sending money, or no, I'm not taking this USB stick into my organization, whether if you had sent that content to them previously, it would then turn into that kind of thing. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's called sextortion or revenge porn, actually. I forget, there's different headings for different things, but I wouldn't be surprised.
We leave it to you, Lisa. All right, we're back with the momently glitch. The
Am I
the the
back?
the RT gods are not with us today. But hopefully they'll be ever kinder to us. Maybe we move on for the topic. Maybe it's a topic or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's a very, very interesting question, and I think we got the gist of it from you, Lisa. Yeah, it's interesting to see. Well, I also see some stats around it. It would be pretty interesting to see how much of a correlation there is between the two. Cool. Anything else to add on that topic before the next topic? Well, I learned to read messages properly and bring it up.
This is turning into, instead of a podcast, it's more just about Sean relearning how to read, but that's entertaining into and of itself, I suppose.
Yep. No comment. So the next one is, can you and Sean discuss why nation states would want to attack each other for data when they could buy data from a data breach?
God, we do some topics on this, don't we? You don't have whiplash between romance fraud to nation state attacks.
China, North Korea.
So I have a bit of a thing about this. People say, oh, so one of the things I sort of claimed the other week when we had the MOD incident was that attribution at that point isn't really that important. It's about pulling the business back online, protecting the employees, whatever you need to do. And I got quite a lot of quite fired up infosec individuals coming at me with alternative claims. Shocker, I know. And they were saying, well, yes, it's really important as to whether or not there's a big difference between if it's a ransomware group who've taken the data and put it online or a nation state. And I said, well, is it? Because if a ransomware group takes the MOD's data, puts it online, why wouldn't the nation state just buy the data, in which case the outcome is exactly the same, in my opinion? So I wonder also how many nation states buy data dumps from ransomware groups.
It's an interesting question, and I don't think we'll ever really find out the answer. That's the other thing. Would we? How would we know?
Yeah, we wouldn't. But they would, but strategically, it would make a lot of sense because you wouldn't necessarily have to do anything. You just spend a relatively small amount of money, if anything, to download the dump of data.
Yep, that is true. And yeah, versus the amount of money that you would have to spend to try then target that infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
It is an interesting question. I'm by no means any expert on any of this, so um, I don't know a lot about it, but my gut feel is exactly as you say. And at the end of the day, my view around nation state, threat actors, whatever, like it doesn't matter. Your data's out there, it's gone. It's like someone breaking into your house and you worrying that it's some common thief or some nation state spy, and that maybe later down the line you worried about it, but the immediate reaction is like, oh my god, someone's broken into my house. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
questioning who broke into my house. I'm
Mm-hmm.
questioning how did they break into my house? Why did they manage to get in my house? What things did they take? All of that. Only after that, I might then start worrying about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, someone's just said about how many nation states are funding the actors in the first place or training them up. So that's a really interesting point. I did my master's in international law. And interestingly, the bar for attributing a non-state actor's actions to a nation state is insanely high. So, for example, in Nicaragua, with the Contras, the United States at the time was funding them, they were arming them, they were training them, and that was still held not to be sufficient to say that they were essentially working for the United States government. And we've seen this in Afghanistan, we've seen it in lots of other places, that actually giving a group money, not sufficient. Giving a group sort of the ability to live in your country without any kind of consequences, that's not sufficient either. Like, the barrier for them to be considered in any way attributed to the actions of a country is ridiculously high, to the point where you have to prove that that country has operational control over that group. So when people say KillNet is Russia or KillNet is, maybe we know that from like an anecdotal perspective or from a conversational perspective. But if we're talking about actually being able to say on paper that this is this, then no, you can't say that because you don't have that data. And so this is, I suppose, part of the problem that you have with cyber groups as opposed to armed combatants that we'd normally see, because there would be a lot more evidence as to who those people were and where they were trained and what kind of organizational control. You'd get that from satellite imagery and things like that. And that's all gone when it comes to cyber attacks. So you don't know who these people are, let alone where they're from, who controls them, what phone conversations they have. You're basically in a situation where you're just like, well, they're people who we believe to be of a Russian nationality. And that's basically what you can say.
That's interesting. As Jared mentioned there, didn't realize that bar was high, set so high, and nor did I. And yeah, I had no idea. So, like, yeah, I can imagine in the cyber sense that it's going to be virtually impossible unless you catch them somehow in the office of the government department tapping away at the computer
Yeah,
while they're breaking
exactly.
into you.
Or
It's going to
Putin
be
is literally like, I don't know, like, go guys, awesome work. Like, I don't know what would have to happen, but certainly a lot more than we're currently seeing, that's for sure.
or there's that photo of Kim standing over that one person at the
Just
computer.
clapping, yeah.
No pressure. But yeah, I hadn't realized that it was that high and that significant. So yeah, that's probably more of a reason why nation states can go off and buy this data and even
Mm-hmm.
help fund some of these groups that are doing it, because it's easy for them to go, oh, that's not us, prove it's us.
And I
Um,
think it's interesting to note as well that when we talk about sort of state connected groups, we forget that actually we focus very heavily on China, Russia, and Iran. But actually, if you look at the Israel-Palestine conflict, when that happened in October, the hacktivist group activity was significant. So Anonymous goes to a Palestinian group. There were Israeli groups that were attacking each other. There was the Indian groups that got involved, and then they got attacked back. Like, Indian government sites got attacked back. I think there was the Moroccan Black Cyber Army. I can't remember what they're called, something like that. They got involved, and that brought Moroccan companies into it. So actually, how far would you go? Would you say, well, it's quite easy for us when we're talking about states that we typically don't like Russia, China, and Iran, to sort of say, well, those were Russian, China, and Iranian groups. But then when it comes a bit closer to our doorstep, are we going to say that's France? And that's, do you know what I mean? Because you have to
yeah.
apply the same rule. And then it starts to be like, oh, I don't know if we want to say that was India per se attacking, you know, attacking Palestine, or Morocco attacking Israel. I mean, do we want to say that? I don't know if we want to say that.
Well, that also leads on to the last topic that we're going to talk about, where without having that significant proof, I think you're heading down a very dangerous path. and it could potentially cause problems. Because now you putting forward allegations, and that could hinder, especially if there's tensions already between two countries. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking like India and Pakistan. I'm pretty sure there's like, maybe it's somewhere down, but I was aware that there was quite
Yeah, a lot
strong
continuously.
tensions
Yeah,
between the
yeah.
two countries. And now, if you start having groups that are um, part of one country or the other, and you saying, "Are they attacking them?" That could potentially
Hmm.
escalate political tensions. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And where do you draw that line? That's very difficult, right? So again, this is the problem that you have with cyber, because it's so open to anyone. Like, anyone can really get stuck in now to any conflict they want. Let's say that everybody on this call decides we're going to go and attack whatever, some infrastructure of some other country, Mongolia, because that's where I was recently. Are we then saying that the UK has attacked Mongolia? Because we would say that in other contexts, but would we be happy saying that in our context? Like, if you're saying, because then it turns on how much does the government know of our actions, and you can't prove that. So as you said,
yeah.
like, you're then starting to enter into the realm of assumptions, which infosec does, unfortunately to say, a lot, where we start doing 1 + 1 = 9, and therefore it's China. And I think sometimes that's true, because naturally I think it is true, but I don't think it's always the situation, and we have to be very careful that we look at things. One last example on this was, someone said to me, "Oh, well, this attack was done by the Russians," and I said, "Well, how do you know that was done by the Russians?" And they said, "Oh, well, because they use Cyrillic." And I was like, "Well, I've got a Cyrillic keyboard on my iPhone, so I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not Russian. I'm not in Russia. I'm not controlled by the Russian state, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, maybe, who knows?" But that's not sufficient evidence to tell someone that someone's Russian. That's just, all it tells you is that that person's got access to a Cyrillic keyboard. That's all it tells you. And I think we have to be very careful. And you're going to obviously bring up a certain recent incident that I think, again, needs some attention. And it won't be me bringing up the controversial thing, which is good.
Lisa
Yay.
said.
Lisa once said.
No, it's very true. Like, that example, I think, is spot on. I mean, there's no Russian speaking people outside of Russia, right?
Yeah,
It
exactly.
or even now, and you raise a really good point, like around access to things now. So you can go translate. I mean, heck, even ChatGPT 4, they just released it, where you can have real time conversations, and it will don't know how well it works. In the demo, it looked great, but in reality, don't know. But you can actually have a full on conversation with ChatGPT, and it will um, uh, translate your language into the other
Hmm.
person's language, and the other person's language into your language. So now you have technology that will allow you to definitely mask who you are even further.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. And you got to be very careful. What does it actually prove?
And King of the Rock has a very good thing there. Assume makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah,
I
it's
like
really
that.
true. I like that a lot. I really do. Yeah. And I think, yeah, we've got to be very careful in infosec, because certainty has always got to be a really big word. It's got to be the sort of word that is, used very sparingly. And we use it in a laissez-faire attitude too often.
Yeah. And that brings us on to
Drum
the big word.
roll.
I know what it's about. So,
No clue.
a recent event involved a large organization called Zscaler. Now, Zscaler is, I forgot the exact term. There's a term they use, but basically, it's like a glorified proxy solution. So instead of having a corporate proxy, you have these agents installed in your system, it will go through their systems to go out to the internet with monitoring and rule sets and all of that kind of stuff, and you can have internal private access. Um, I forgot the term. This is going to annoy me. So if anyone can remember the term or knows the term, please put it in the chat because it annoys me that I forgot the term. But it's pretty cool stuff, and it works quite well. There was I think it was last week or the week before, there was a tweet by someone who saw some posts on breach forums. And those who don't know, breach forums got taken over by law enforcement this week, so no
Mhm.
longer. Yippee. No, not zero trust connectivity. It's some other term. I'll see if I can find it. So there was a post on breach forums. It didn't even mention the company name, and it just mentioned like the figure, and then they kind of mentioned the company name with the first letter only. And people immediately jumped and said, it's Zscaler. And Zscaler's been breached and all of this kind of stuff, which may or may not have been the case at the time. So Zscaler obviously got wind of this and they had to start an investigation because everyone was pointing in that direction. Now, there are other companies, cybersecurity, Caspi, that's the one. Thanks, King of Rock. There are other companies, security companies out there that do start with Z. They may not be in the same field of what the month was said, but there are other companies, cybersecurity companies out there that start with Z. At the end of the day, the other important thing to note is that we've seen numerous cases where people have claimed they made a breach on an organization and it turned out to be entirely false. Or
Mhm.
they've royally screwed up the name. There was that one case, I forgot the company, but they like totally screwed up the name of the company. They got it completely wrong. It was some
It was Darktrace and
yes,
Darktrace, and they'd hacked Darktracer, but they forgot the R. So they
yes,
put Darktrace with Darktrace's logo, and obviously everyone in InfoSec was like, oh! And then it transpired it wasn't Darktrace, and they
yes,
had to apologize. Yeah.
yeah. So there have been numerous cases where claims have been made and they have proved false.
Yeah.
Um, and the point I'm trying to make, it didn't go that significant on the likes of Twitter, but there were several people going, "Oh, Zscaler has been breached," with zero evidence to
Mhm.
show that. There was absolutely no evidence, not even the name of the company. Everything that was said was purely speculation. There
Mhm.
was not even the name mentioned in the breach notice. Yes, you could assume it was Zscaler because 2 + 2 + 2, that kind of thing. But still, there was no concrete evidence actually pointing to Zscaler. And what's turned out, Zscaler's obviously had to spend a significant amount of time and cost and resourcing to perform an investigation. And the result was there was a test system that was open, had no production data, and there was no actual breach of production customer information. So likely only test data, which is meh. Um, and this had a real impact. So the impact is other people who use Zscaler are now having to worry about it and stress about it. And more importantly, from a financial point of view, from a Zscaler point of view, it actually hit the share price. Now, the point is, you're now in a scenario where people on Twitter with zero evidence can now go make bold claims and actually impact a company's share price. And that scares me.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think so this is what I basically do is I help prepare companies for cyber attacks. And one of the things, the conversations I have with my clients is that the narrative can just run away. And the problem is what's actually happened to you may be one thing, what people say on Twitter is something else. And you have to deal with the thing that gets said on Twitter, and it's just it's one of these things that costs money because it's using resources. Your comms team is now putting out a fire that doesn't exist, but they have to still firefight that thing. You have to, if people are saying things online, you have to go investigate that, even if at the moment your forensics teams or your IT security teams have no evidence for that. You have to be like, well, where did they get that from? Maybe we have to do our due diligence. We have to look. So you're using up resourcing, you're using up time, you're using up effort, you're taking away that time and effort from what's actually happened, which could be significant. It wasn't in this case, but could be someone's really serious, you're taking away resourcing from that. The other side to this is when a company gets breached and the ransomware groups put out that they're going to dump, say, healthcare data. My feeling is that we have to be in a situation, and I appreciate that the counter narrative to this is going to be free speech, blah, blah, blah. But I think journalists and InfoSec professionals have a level of responsibility here to not point people to the fact that this data is going to be dumped. Classic example was a law firm that got hit a few years back, and they had Donald Trump, I think they had Lady Gaga, Snoop Dogg, like loads of really high profile celebrities, and the ransomware groups were auctioning off each celebrity's data. I don't think it was an auction, actually. I think it was just a timer. And the journalists started saying like, oh, Lady Gaga's personal data and information and whatever is going out at this time. What do you think the first thing people do is going to be? It's going to be, I'm going to go to the site and download the data that this person has stolen. And so you've got a level of responsibility, because what you are also doing is you're helping the attacker. Yep. You think you're generating hype, you think you're generating discussion, but the name of that company in this particular case didn't need to be added. You could have had the discussion without the name of the company, right? Yep. What you're doing in a lot of these situations is you are the only team you are helping is the ransomware group, because you're putting pressure on the company. And I think you have to be really careful with what you say. And I try now to be very cautious with what I actually say and what I actually post until someone's put out a post breach report or something like that, just because I have seen firsthand what happens behind those doors, and it's not pretty.
No, at the end of the day, like, yeah, you could say it's a company and that, but there are real humans behind this who are going to be having a really crappy time.
Our community, it's people from our own community who we're doing this to.
And regardless of your thoughts of the company, they're still humans. They're still trying to do a job. And put it this way: put yourself in their shoes. How would you feel if someone started just making bold claims about your company with zero evidence to back it up?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a big pile on Twitter and all of that. I don't think you would appreciate that much. And the irony of this all is from a community or industry where we go trust but verify and all of this kind of stuff, where we sometimes don't do it ourselves. And I get it. It's easy to get sucked into the hype, and especially on the likes of social media, you can get sucked in really easily.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very important that we stay approach it with a level head, and certainly not saying, oh, just ignore it all and don't do anything about it in that. No. So like with the Zscaler thing, certainly it wasn't a case of, oh, if you're using Zscaler, just don't worry about it. Wait till we get the information, the evidence, and then act from there, rather than jump to speculations or, as in the point above, assume things. So I think it's really important. And we've seen this several times. I mean, like another scenario I can think of was when the OpenSSL vulnerability was being announced. It's like, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever. It's like the worst vulnerability to ever happen. And then it turned out to be a pretty damn squid. And the problem that we have with that is then you taking people's time away from actually doing other things that are really important to spend on something that turned out to be really nothing. And we're all under stress. We're all overworked, so we don't need more stress.
And just to throw one more thing into the mix before we go through the questions, imagine if you were going through this and you were working ridiculous hours to try and rectify a breach that happened to your company, and you saw people in your community attacking and trolling and piling on, as Gerard said, how likely do you think it is then that you feel after that has happened and after you've recovered from the breach, I'm going to share the lessons learned with my community and help them learn? Or do you think you go, actually, screw you, you didn't help me, you weren't on my team, I'm not sharing any lessons learned with you, keeping it to myself? Because we don't share lessons learned either. That's the other thing, and that's probably in part because we feel that instead of it being an open discussion where we can learn from stuff, people will just troll us, so we just can't be bothered with it.
There's another angle that made me think of is a lot of the people doing these jump into assumptions and that often work at organizations that provide security services and products and that. So what you're going to have is a situation like, I'm not going to be interested in dealing with your company because you don't act professionally. And yeah, why would I want to do or associate myself with anything that if your employees are jumping at? And I get it, maybe it's one or two people, but it could still plant that bad seed where someone might actually see this and go, you know what, I'm not going to put up with that, and I'm going to avoid doing any sort of business with them. So there's a lot of
we've all done stuff we shouldn't have done. We've all piled on stuff. We've all got involved in something on Twitter that we then go, oh, I really wish I hadn't done that. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying like, oh, well, you did this, you did that. But we're just saying learn from it and think a little bit before you jump on something and think, well, I don't know if I'm going to jump on that quite yet. I'll wait. We've all done it. We all know everyone's done it. It's a mistake we've all made, but we do also need to learn from it.
Yeah, exactly. And again, emphasizing this isn't a giving a free pass to companies and saying, no, just let them do whatever. If there's evidence and all of that pointing to companies haven't acted correctly, then sure, we definitely need to hold them accountable. But it's kind of a case like give a benefit of a doubt until we have all the details at hand. Because it could often, especially in the case of breaches, we've seen it so often now that it actually is more about the bad people trying to get the publicity and big up themselves because, we can really trust criminals. They're very honest and reliable and trustworthy people.
Headshot's got a good point. He said, should people be held accountable for these things, going back to the last podcast about false or misinformation?
In one way, I agree, but in another way, I disagree. So it could head down a slippery slope, right? So we know who's going to police this, how you're going to have like people held accountable and all of that kind of stuff. So you kind of getting down to this dystopia type of thing where you can't dare say anything critical about this company or that company. But at the same time, people do need to be held accountable for their actions. So from my view, I don't know. It's a difficult one. What are your thoughts?
I think it's difficult as well. I think it's one thing to say, if you're associated with a brand, taking benefits or payment in any capacity from the brand, yes, you have to fully disclose that. And then if you promote something that's really bad, you have to be held accountable for that. I think that's fine. When it comes to just expressing things, personal feeling is I usually mark my tweets with, this is my opinion. And I'm entitled to that opinion, but that is all it is. It's not fact. It's not an analysis or anything like that, or peer-reviewed paper on something. It's literally my opinion. And I think that can help. But again, it's very difficult because I have posted things that have been, at the time I've said this is my opinion, I genuinely believe this is true from what I've been reading, and then it transpires that's not what happened at all. So I don't know. I think I always try to publish something or post something that kind of redacts it and says, actually, what actually happened was this, not this. And I know you've done that as well. I've seen a couple of times you've done that. But how do you police it? How do you hold people accountable for what they say online? I mean, We don't even know who half these people are.
Yeah, we can't even stop the. Do you want to see nudes in my profile?
I know. Yeah, exactly. I seem to get that with every tweet at the moment. Some bot writes
So
nudes in my profile. I'm like, great, thanks. That's brilliant. I was
yeah,
talking about Sainsbury's, but fine.
okay. Don't know. Those two are connected. Yeah, gotta love them bots.
No.
But yeah, it's a difficult one. And yeah, I don't know. I wish there was a simple and easy answer, but there's not. I think one way that we can help is as a community, we start pushing people in the right direction and say like, hey, are you sure about that? Or challenge people. Oh, it's Zscaler. Well, where's the evidence?
Yeah, I agree. And saying like, "Oh, where did you get that from? Can you share the link or something?" Um, Although that said too, sometimes that can descend into another whole battle of wills on Twitter. So it is difficult, but I mean, we've got people on LinkedIn as well who I won't name who post continuous diatribes of absolute nonsense as far as I can tell.
What like it's the DNS?
Yeah. We're not naming names, but we know who they are. And it's how do you hold even that to account? You can't. And I also don't think the other thing part of that is I don't think or believe that we should be able to form these kangaroo courts where we can create pylons and everyone goes after somebody and tries to take them down, because essentially then what you're doing is basically you're just trolls. And I'm not sure that's an appropriate way either to handle it. I don't particularly like those sorts of let's all gang up on this person type things. There have been exceptions, but most of the time, I'm not keen on them.
I think there's a difference between ganging up on someone and holding someone accountable, and I think that's the key. So if someone's claiming and making these bold claims, and then you go, "Hey, have a few people. Where's the evidence? That's not quite correct. This is or that's not true, etc., etc." I think that's acceptable. But yeah, when you have people doing and saying nasty things, I think that's probably where the line is. If you're not focusing on the facts and the truth,
Mm-hmm.
and you start resorting to personal things, then that's probably where it's starting to go into that realm of trolling.
Yeah. And I think you see that as well. It will cease to be constructive and it will very quickly descend into you're lying, you've made this up, you're this, you're that. And it's like,
Chaos. Yep, absolute chaos. Um,
Twitter, the bastion of free speech.
yep. So there's another one from Gerard about it's been difficult with Twitter being an echo chamber. Um, I think that is a large problem with social media, and that's why I think sometimes the hype is around being the first one to it, get the likes,
Mm,
the follows, the attention, rather than actually focusing on the thing. And I get it. It's nice to get the attention. It's nice to get the 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 constant notifications on your phone and it's going wild and it's all excitement and that. But it's really important to realize that in the long run, it's going to be very short lived. People are going to
mm.
forget about you and move on.
You
And
can't pay
worse
your
yet,
mortgage with likes.
yeah, or worse yet, you could be entirely wrong, and then people are not going to remember you for the entirely wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So be very careful. Um, my my opinion about the likes of Twitter and that is if you want to get a following and that, I'm not claiming I'm great and that. I know Lisa's got way more followers than me, so take her advice more than mine.
Go
Um,
caving.
it
Yes, yeah.
it the likes and follows and that don't help in your real
No.
job outside of real life outside of Twitter. Um,
Zero.
what is nice is reaching out in a network and helping other people. That's how it is, and that's often takes time to build up into and being. I was actually on a training management training course this afternoon, and one of the things around and influencing. I'm not an influencer. I'm just making sure everyone knows that.
Blah!
Or thought leader, but influencing people is listening to people and being consistent.
Yeah,
So
I like that.
that I think, and to do that is going to take time. So
Yeah.
rather than focusing on the quick wins, focus on the longer goal,
Mhm.
the long term thing.
Yeah, and the people who, when I think about, I mean, I have a certain number of followers. It's not in any way massive in comparison to InfoSec, but if I look at that, the number of people who I actually message or go on calls with and sort of say, "Hey, have you got any experience of this?" Is tiny. It's really tiny. So actually, and I used to think, as I think lots of people have fallen into this trap, that somehow followers equals anything, but it equals absolutely nothing. You get no money from it. You get no opportunities from it. You're not famous. Nothing positive comes from it. The only thing that I would say guaranteed will come from having a large following is hate.
Yes.
That is the
Uh,
only thing that I can guarantee to you will come your way. It's hate and trolling and just weird, creepy men sending you photos of body parts you don't want. That's it.
and more bots asking for nudes and profile.
Yeah, 100%. I like how one comment here says, "Isn't Twitter just a bunch of porn bots following other porn bots?"
Yeah. I think we've seen
It's going
examples.
so well. Everything's going so well.
How does that work? Nudes
Oh,
and
that's
profile.
so funny.
Shimani's. uh and then it's like listening to people or hot tub streams. Both. I don't know.
We're good. We'll skip past that one.
Yeah. Um but yeah, I'm just trying to read some of the other comments. So the one was from another one from Headshot. From financial side, with shares, you could spread misinformation to for cheaper share price, buy it, expecting it to go back up and then sell higher with profit.
What,
I
you're talking about what Elon's playbook is?
I think that was actually mentioned. I think it was Dan Card, maybe. I could be wrong. I think with the recent Zscaler, I remember seeing something along that line. So I think it's definitely possible.
You need to have an awful large following for that, though, because you would need, when you look at like how much that needs to move, it needs to move substantially. So you either need to have a load of people following you who are incredibly rich and will dump millions into share price, or you need to have an absolutely enormous following, which is why people like Elon can do it, but other celebrities have not been able to have that effect. So we know Elon did it with the GameStop saga, where he artificially inflated GameStop shares, and then obviously got out, and then what happened and it plummeted. So that is something that I think they call them pump and dump schemes. That those are things that have happened, but I think the amount of people you would need to buy share would be enormous. So I think for like ordinary people in InfoSec, I would say that's probably unlikely. Even for people like Troy Hunt, I don't think he would have a big enough following to make a difference. I don't know what the conversion rate is, but even if it's 1% of your following, that's not going to make a massive difference unless they're dumping a lot of money into those shares. But we have seen, I want to say it was Equifax, where the CEO or the execs dumped a load of shares before they published that they'd been breached. So you could see that, because you'd have employee shares, for example, or like senior execs who would have share plans in the company that they work for, and then obviously know about the breach. And before we publish it, let's just dump our shares before this plummets. That could happen. Although it should be noted that's highly, highly illegal. And if anyone works out that you've done that, which probably isn't that difficult, you are probably going to jail.
Well, that's what happened to one person at Equifax. They sold the shares, got caught, went to jail, and if they kept the shares, they would have made more money. So, ain't
I
karma a
don't
bit
think
of
it
a
would be very easy to make it look like it wasn't being dumped just before you publish that you've been breached. Like that would be quite difficult to prove, I think.
Yep. So I'm trying to look at Zscaler's shares around about when that breach happened. I think it was the 9th of May, and can't s- I can't actually notice it on the graph of the share price, so it probably didn't have much of an impact. I know they did share. There were some images shared on uh, Twitter that did show a dip, but that's probably if you're looking at the day's price. So it's if you're looking over like months, it's a lot smoother. Whereas if you look at a single day, it fluctuates a lot. So
I
there
don't
was.
think for a company, I don't think share price is really impacted at all anymore, because I'm not. I think breaches are too common. They're not now massive outlier events that would cause investors to be spooked and start selling, which is what causes share prices to drop, obviously. So I'm not sure it would have that effect. However, a lot of people talk about share price as the financial motivator, but of course, what actually is the financial motivator is the absolutely enormous cost of recovery. I mean,
Hmm.
at the British Library, we're over 7 million already. So, I mean, I think the enormous cost of recovery is what's really going to hurt that company, not so much the initial drop in share price.
Well, Equifax. I'm just trying to find this now. Guess how much it cost them.
What, the total cost of the breach?
Yep.
Well, I guess they already provide credit monitoring, so that was free of charge.
Oh. um. But yeah, guess
How much?
it was like, yeah. So this was back in 2020, 1.7 billion.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
that's including fines and beefing up the security and
Yeah, of
IR on
course.
that. But
Mhm.
yeah.
And that's what's going to hurt you. It's going to be that combined with the lawsuits for the next few years after that probably aren't even in that figure, that is going to really hurt you. Not a sort of 10% drop in share price for 2 weeks. Like, no one cares about that. As Gerard said earlier on, it bounces back. No one cares. But that figure is absolutely devastatingly large. I mean, I can feel that CFOs everywhere would be like, oh my God, I don't want to pay the money.
Cheers, I'm out of here. Bye.
Yeah, I'm resigning and I want my payment package, my dividends.
Yeah, that's a bit of a that is a
A
bit of
lot, a lot.
a
That's
hard
way
pill to
more than I
swallow.
thought.
Yeah. Now it would be like that's one. It would be interesting to see things like Marriott.
Hmm.
So Marriott, where their PCR was. Do you know about that one?
There are many Marriott breaches, but the recent Marriott breach, the latest Marriott breach,
Where
maybe.
they found that even though they were PCR
Oh
compliant, they
yeah,
weren't.
they weren't encrypting like they said they were encrypting. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see the fallout from that and what the costs of that are. British Airways. We could go on. We could spend the whole day talking about a podcast about breaches.
Yeah, and the cost
Um,
of breaches.
yeah. Headshot raised another interesting uh, point there. With fines like that, cyber insurance would cover that.
No, you can't insure against regulatory fines, because regulatory fines, that's true of every company, that's true of everything. So for example, your insurance in a car won't cover speeding fines, it won't cover enforcement action by the police. That would defeat the point
I guess so.
of the action, which is supposed to be a deterrent. So you can't insure against it. But what you can do is you can obviously pool cash, and you can have a pot of cash that's specifically set aside for ICO fines or whatever. That you can do. You could do that obviously with a group of companies, but you can't insure against fines or whatever. Fun
Yeah,
fact.
makes sense because that, yeah, as you say, kind of defeating the whole point of having the fines in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like, no, my insurance covers that. I can just speed. It's fine.
But we're fine. Admin. Ah, we're fine. We got it covered. We covered by insurance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So no, you can't.
Cool. All right. No, that was good. And I don't think we have any more topics
We had to
on the
do a lot
agenda.
more maths, I feel, in this than we usually would have to do it in podcasts. So
Well, apparently I had to do a lot more reading than
you did.
I normally have to do. So,
Oh, we've got
just
one more.
quick question from Jared. Before running out of time, what are the thoughts on SIEM? So SIEM. So security of incident. No, yeah, incident and event monitoring. Takeovers and mergers this week with Palo Alto taking on QRadar and Exabeam and Logarithm coming together.
Crowded market consolidates.
So a bit of background about myself around where the reason why I say a bit of background because I've seen the way SIEM have migrated, and the background is why I've seen it. So I worked for a company called SecureWorks. SecureWorks was very much in the SIEM market when I joined, and this was oh god, CMS.
It's been a heavy
20
season.
2011 or 2012, I can't remember some of them. And that SIEM was like all the rage, and that was very much it. If you go have a look at SecureWorks now, you probably won't even find a single mention of SIEM on their sites. SIEM is, in my view, an old way and an old approach to the problem. So SIEM is very much, or my understanding of it is very much signature based, which is becoming more and more easier for the bad people to work around and circumvent. Where it is at now is behavior based. So you want to make sure that if you see this influx of data going out from a person working after hours, that's like an immediate red flag. So that's where I kind of see, and that you hear things like XDR and SAW and all these kinds of things. So I think a lot of the older SIEM companies are now finding it harder, and they have to adapt to the market. That's my take on it. I don't know what you think, Lisa.
I think this is what happens in growth markets. You see a lot of growth in one area, and then you see consolidation, and then you'll end up with fewer and fewer actual players who are in that market. And I think this is just the natural kind of stage that a lot of these things go through, probably. But we'll see. I mean, I think again, like, who knows what this will actually look like. Give it a year, and then we'll be able to assess whether it's been positive or negative.
Yeah, will be interesting. See where it goes. And sometimes with these mergers, they aren't definite until they're being signed and go through all the legal and what's competitive clarifications and all of that stuff, and that often takes a while. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, cool.
Another month of chatter. We've covered a lot in this episode. We went from romance scams to nation states to you should behave on Twitter to porn bots. I mean, we did a lot. There's a bit of wide coverage of the infosec industry.
Don't forget maths and reading as well. So
exactly, maths and reading classes happen tonight.
Yep. But yeah.
Yeah, so come along next month. Again, think of topics you want to discuss. If there's things you really want to talk about, let us know, and just be a little bit kind so they're not too specific, because we're not the most intelligent sometimes.
Pineapple on pizza.
Yes, and get on to Dave Kennedy now. Make sure everyone just keep, he will go down a cave.
And Lisa will eat a pineapple on pizza, the whole thing.
Yeah, a small one, not large.
Well, define small.
It's got to be like that size.
Okay. That's more medium in my books, but yeah. That'll work.
Pleasure as always, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone, and thanks for the interactions. Really appreciate that. That's great. It always makes it more exciting. So
Definitely.
keep it coming. Hope everyone has a great weekend and happy Friday and all of that, and catch you next month. Thanks,
Bye.
Lisa. Thanks, everyone. Bye.